Hello, welcome to Wine Blast. And in this episode, we're going to start with a brain teaser.
Oh, I do love a good brain teaser.
Okay, so what do Kim Kardashian, Voskehat, and the world's oldest shoe all have in common?
Has Kanye West dated all of them? Have they all got their own reality TV shows?
Possible.
Yeah, or is it? Well, hang on, I've got it now. It's something to do with bottom fillers.
Oh, your mind works in very strange ways. No, the common factor is Armenia.
Of course. How could you not know that? Kim Kardashian has Armenian heritage via her dad.
Voskehat is an Armenian grape variety. And the world's oldest shoe, dating back 5,500 years, was found in the Areni cave complex in Armenia.
The world's oldest shoe.
It's not Jimmy Choo.
I think I've got a couple of those, haven't I? They look like it, or they smell like it. Anyway, so
it's a very, very snazzy little leather number, probably snazzier than yours.
Okay.
Size 6, so it would fit me, with laces. Would you believe? There you go. Anyway, we'll come back to this because a 6,000-year-old winery was found in the same complex.
Can I just say I'm loving where this episode is going, which is, I have no idea where it's going. You're genuinely frying my brain already with the references to Kim Kardashian and sort of Bronze Age archaeology.
This
is my kind of
sort of. But we are going to be. Don't worry, we're going to be coming on to wine very, very soon because I know that's much more your thing than bums and shoes, isn't it? And we've got lots of fascinating stuff about Armenian wine. You'll be pleased to hear. Because this is one of the. Let's get serious. This is one of the world's oldest winemaking cultures. Huge diversity as well as history, even though I think history, it's fair to say, hasn't always been kind to the Armenian people. It's a fascinating subject and a delicious one, and we've got some great bottles lined up to taste as well, have we not?
So you had me at wine. Thank you. Definitely feeling much more settled now. But before we start the episode, I did just want to, if it's okay, mention a couple of things.
Don't you always?
As I sometimes do. So firstly, I wanted to give a shout out to Helen Bailey, who wrote in from Kansas City as follows. Helen writes, I just wanted to let you know that I absolutely love your podcast. Thank you, Helen. I've been thinking about doing the Master of Wine after working in the industry for almost 5 years now, and you both have given me a very good perspective of what to expect and a very nice and encouraging reason why to keep learning. Thank you and cheers.
Thank you, Helen. I think Helen's hit the nail on the head there. The Master of Wine qualification is all about learning, but not just studying, not the studying bit, but also when you become an MW, it's about having an open mind and using that knowledge to help other people. I mean, it's essentially one long learning process, isn't it? It doesn't end. Yeah, which sounds terrible, but it's not. It's fabulous.
It's brilliant. And Helen, we would wholeheartedly encourage you to go for it. It's it's intense. You definitely need time and you need energy.
And you need support of everybody around you.
Yeah, that's a very good point too.
You really do.
You do. But it's so worth it.
Yeah. So let us know when you start and how you get on. I mean, maybe we can follow your journey on Wine Blast.
Oh, there we go.
How about that?
Helen, no pressure, but here we go. We can see it all coming together right here in real time, anyway, over the airwaves. And just one other thing I wanted to mention before we started. We've had a message from Steve and Talon, the lucky so-and-so who won a case of delicious Bordeaux wine in our competition a short while back. If you remember, and you've got quite a good memory, so you probably remember this, Stephen also loves the podcast and had suggested to his wife that they could become husband and wife masters of wine like us.
I do remember this. I do remember. She didn't quite share his enthusiasm, did she? Let's be honest.
That's one way of saying it. No. But he did, I'm glad to say, he did get her to subscribe to the podcast, which is a win.
It's a win for us. Thank you very much, Stephen.
But anyway,
thank you to
Stephen's just got back in touch to say thanks for the Bordeaux wine arriving. But there's one problem.
What's that?
Well, in the interim, his wife's got pregnant.
No! Well, that's amazing. Oh, congratulations. God, I mean, is this our first Wine Blaster baby? Ooh.
I think they might be stretching it a bit far.
Maybe. Sorry, I'm getting carried away.
I'm not even here yet. But
I think I might know where you're going with this in terms of the interim and the problem.
Yeah. So Stephen now has a dilemma, doesn't he?
I bet he does, yes.
This
case Stephen.
Delicious Bordeaux wines just sitting there winking at them. And Stephen wrote to say, they all look great. I can't wait to try them. But given my wife's current condition, she's guilting me into waiting for her so she can enjoy them too.
Go for the guilting, go for the guilting.
Seems only fair, to which she says, to Stephen's credit, seems only fair, but I might sneak the sweet wine for myself. What do we think, Susie Berry, relationship
it's like
expert?
The moral maze, isn't it? I mean, I have to say, I'm allowed to say this, I did enjoy the odd glass or two of wine when I was pregnant. I thought if a small amount of wine made me happy and kept me sane, it would be better for all concerned. That's how I justified it to myself.
But easy on the public health advice.
Yeah, no, absolutely. It's not for everyone, and probably better to play it safe, frankly. In which case, I'd say, Stephen, okay, these are all good wines and will easily keep for 9 months. You can use them maybe to celebrate your new arrival in due course.
Good idea.
And if the odd bottle were to go missing in the interim or got accidentally dropped, I'm sure no one's going to notice. Are they? Are they? No.
I'm just thinking about this. Doesn't Stephen's wife subscribe to the podcast now? so she'll be hearing this as well. So,
oh dear. We shouldn't take sides, should
no.
we? My final word would be enjoy the wines when the time is right. There's no pressure. They were free after all, and you can always buy more bottles of the same if they go down well.
Very true.
Or disappear. And in the meantime, you probably won't have time to drink because you'll be listening to the podcast.
Yes.
With the dedication we expect.
There you go.
And that's before you start on the MW course together.
Yes. There we go. There we have it. I'm glad we've cleared that up.
Enough said.
Leaving a trail of carnage in our wake. Yeah. Broken bottles, broken relationships. Anyway, shall we move on?
Good idea.
Right.
Good idea.
Yeah.
So, Armenia and its wines. Now, you've been delving into the ancient history of wine, haven't you, on your recent filming trips to Georgia and Lebanon? And this piqued our curiosity about the Caucasus region, Georgia, Armenia, Azerbaijan, Turkey, which are thought to be the area where the wild grapevine was first domesticated and proper winemaking began. Yeah. Amazing.
So, exactly. So this was in the Neolithic or Stone Age period, according to current thinking. So in Georgia, I filmed at the Vayots-Dzor excavation site where pottery shards with traces of wine have been found dating back to 6000 BC. So that's 8,000 years ago. So that essentially, as it stands, that is ground zero for wine. Which obviously for a wine lover is an amazing place to visit.
Amazing,
it was a totally intense experience, not easy to visit. But in our case, it was made all the more special by this sort of dry thunder and lightning storm kicking up just as we filmed there, just as we started to crack open these wines at this oldest site for wine.
If anybody hasn't seen this, the filming is really amazing, very dramatic.
The camera remember sort of thinking we should go and shelter because it's not safe and it's about to tip down. It never did.
But it didn't tip down.
It didn't. It was just this cataclysmic thunder and lightning going on all around us as we opened these, wines that could have been made in the Stone Age and food that could have been made in the Stone Age. It was just crazy. It was like the ancestors were joining us in the party, as John Werdeman, our guide, said at the time. But generally speaking, though, I reckon there's lots still to discover in this whole region about wine history.
So
that includes Armenia too.
Yeah, well, exactly. This is where we come on to Armenia. It's a neighbour of Georgia to the south. It's a landlocked nation bordered by Georgia, Azerbaijan, Turkey and Iran. It's mostly mountainous. Around 70% of the country is mountains. And it's also, as we've said, an ancient winemaking culture.
This is the Areni 1 cave evidence you were talking about earlier.
Yeah. So this site is in the Vayots-Dzor region of southern Armenia. Coincidentally, it is a major wine region today. But archaeologists found a wine press and fermentation vats, also storage jars with grape seeds from vitis vinifera and drinking cups. And they were all dated to around 4000 BC.
Wow, that's amazing.
They also found a shoe, as we mentioned earlier, but it's not particularly relevant here. Not much to do with wine, but there we go.
Discount the shoe at your cost. The shoe's always relevant. Was it a winemaker's shoe? That's the
could
question.
Be.
What were winemakers wearing back in the day? Was it the Converse All-Star of its day? I don't know what the winemakers...
The UGG or the gumboot.
What is it they wear in Australia? I think they call it redbacks or something.
I don't know.
Is there a winemaker's shoe? What is an iconic winemaker? Please write in, any winemakers listening. What's the iconic winemaker's shoe? I'd be interested. I'll stop now.
Yeah, you heard it first on Wine Blast, and probably last as well. So anyway, this was all interesting, but perhaps not the shoe bit, but the rest of it. And then we noticed, didn't we, that Armenian wines kept popping up here and there. And you talked to Alberto Antonini, who's an international consultant, wine consultant, who also makes wines in Armenia.
We've had on the show.
I filmed for Wine Masters TV a masterclass episode on what we described as the old world, which featured Armenia. And then we came upon this story of two young women taking modern Armenian wine out into the world. And all of this together got us intrigued. And so here we are. Indeed. We hope you're intrigued too.
Indeed. So, basically in summary, we've got an ancient winemaking culture, which tends to mean loads of unique sort of indigenous and historic wine grape varieties and styles. We've got a very mountainous country, which means plenty of unique wine terroirs waiting to be exploited.
Altitude.
And then we've got this very young industry, but with some dynamic people taking Armenian wine into the modern era. So
pretty much, yeah.
So
really. Anyway, so perhaps at this point it's worth adding, I think, a thought on politics. Is it worth it? Maybe, and the social history. Now, Armenia is an ancient country, but it's had a tough time over the years. And I suppose that's what can happen when you have powerful neighbours. During World War I, it's estimated that 1.5 million Armenians were exterminated under the Ottoman Empire in what's known as the Armenian genocide. Modern day Turkey, though, does deny this ever happened. Since that time, there's been a large Armenian diaspora or population living outside the country, thought to be twice or three times as big as the homebound population.
Yeah, there's a big Armenian community in Lebanon, actually.
Is there?
I was working.
I suppose that makes sense then, doesn't it? Yeah.
Doing this filming recently, and I was actually working with some of them when I was there.
I didn't know that.
They were really lovely people, and we actually had a brilliant drone operator who was part of the
Armenian drone operator
in Lebanon.
Intriguing. Anyway, after World War I, Armenia was incorporated into the Soviet Union for the next 70 years until 1991. Now, this was a blow for the wine sector. Probably, obviously, because the Soviets forced them to focus on mass production and brandy. And they were largely cut off from the rest of the world. More recently, there's been an ongoing conflict with Azerbaijan over the Nagorno-Karabakh province, which does have vineyards and oak forests, but which Azerbaijan is now claiming.
Yeah, so we've got historic conflict and now current conflict.
Yeah.
With seriously, wine caught in the middle.
Poor wine, and all its lovely people. So this is the perfect point, I think, to bring in Amy Kushgarian. She's Armenian by heritage, but grew up in Italy. Her family had wineries there. Then she went to school and university in the US. After all that, her father Vaha invited her to move back and join his wine operation, which she did. And she's now COO of Wineworks, their custom crush winery incubator. But that's not all, because she's also founded her own label, Zolal, to revitalise Armenia's ancient and indigenous grape varieties.
And she's still not 30, is she?
No.
Oh, my goodness.
Yeah, she puts the rest of us to shame.
She slightly does.
I mean, Amy, she definitely lives life in the fast lane, which you can also tell by the way she talks. Yeah. But I started by asking her to set the scene for us in terms of Armenia and its wines.
Yeah, so Armenia has this dichotomy of sitting between having an ancient tradition of winemaking, but still is a very young winemaking nation. When we talk about the Armenian terroir, we usually talk about four things. One is that we have a historic culture of viticulture. And we have two stories that we usually tell when we talk about the history and ancient tradition. And one is that in 2011, National Geographic and UCLA uncovered this cave, which now sits in the Vayots-Dzor region. This cave is important because it dates winemaking in the region 6,000 years ago. So humans were making wine in the Neolithic era, probably from what we call now vitis vinifera species. So when people talk about the birthplace and origins of winemaking, they refer to the vitis vinifera species originating in this area that is in the Caucasus mountains of Georgia, Armenia, Azerbaijan, Turkey, and this whole area. And that cave where humans were making wine is a stone's throw away from most of the vineyards where we make wine from today. The second story that we talk about is in A History, which is a book written by Herodotus, where he recounts Armenians as being ancient wine merchants. At the time of Babylonians and Sumerians, Armenians were winemakers. And what we did is we packaged wine in oak barrels, we loaded them up on a boat called a kur, and we floated down the Euphrates River, where we proceeded to sell our barrels to the Babylonians. We sold our wine, we sold our boat, we sold the animal hide that held the boat together, and then we walked back to Armenia on horses and donkeys, and we repeated that loop, and we started to become wine merchants. Of course, through geopolitics and war and genocide, Armenia didn't quite enter the wine industry until recently, especially during the Soviet Union, when we were somewhat cut off from the rest of the world. We did have winemaking during Soviet time, but it was somewhat oriented towards brandy production. So during the Soviet times, they actually created two grapes, one that's a cross between a Chardonnay and a Ricazitelli, and one between a Cabernet Sauvignon and a Saperavi to produce for brandy production. So they did large scale plantings, very Soviet style, to produce high volume grapes for brandy. There were pockets that were somewhat preserved, specifically in the Vayots-Dzor region, where a lot of the brands today and wineries are being built and projects being started, where the grapes, because of the elevation, because of the land and the way that it's situated, was preserved and maintained to making homemade wine. So farmers continued to make wine and harvested their grapes, but for small batch wine. So in that sense, we started the modern wine industry with vineyards. So most of these vines are 20, 30, 40 years old. And in some cases, we have 100 and 120-year-old vines that predate the Soviet Union. And we have around 30, 40 indigenous grape varieties. Historically, we have around 500 to 1,000. And it's always been a toss-up to really understand how many vitis vinifera varieties that we have in the region. But we have a grape geneticist, Cristina Margarian, who recently released a research paper where she found 500 singular plants with different DNAs, where she went and took them to Geisenheim University in Germany, and she uncovered 500 indigenous vitis vinifera varieties. So the combination between our ancient tradition and our indigenous grapes sets us apart in the winemaking world and gives us a very unique terroir. Combined with our high elevation vineyards, we have the valley floor around 1,000 meters, and we go all the way up to around 1,700 meters. So we have a lot of elevation changes, which gives us phenolic ripeness in the grapes. And we have very extreme temperature changes. So we have very cold, snowy winters, and we have very hot, dry, 100-degree summers. So we experience all four seasons very seasonally.
So taking all of that into account, what would you say are the current trends in Armenian wine? What's particularly exciting? Why should we all try Armenian wines?
Armenia has a very different wine culture than other wine countries. We used to be a brandy drinking, vodka drinking, cigar smoking culture, and now we've turned into a wine drinking culture. We don't follow the path of any other wine region, I would say. Our neighbors of Georgia have a very distinct way of making wine, and we have our own way of making wine. We have most of our projects that use stainless steel tank and modern technology and Caucasian oak barrels and indigenous grape varieties. I would say a trend is to continue to make single varietal wines from our flagship grapes, which are areni for red and Voskehat for white. And I would say some trends are we have quite a few small growers who are starting to make their own wine and produce small batch wineries. In general, the industry is growing very quickly. So we have quite a few international projects. We have international winemakers that are coming and investing and planting new vineyards. And the trends are going to continue to go in towards making quality wine. I would say right now, we're making very good wine, and we're making very good wine with vineyards that were planted during the Soviet Union. So now that we have all these new vineyards being planted with high density farming, drip irrigation, modern viticultural practices, we're going to make great wine in the future. So right now we're talking about the potential.
And just thinking about the international consultants versus the history and the indigenous varieties, how do those two marry? Because obviously you presumably want wines to taste of Armenia, where they come from. How does that work with international consultants?
Yeah, so it's more of a philosophical question. Are you going to plant European varieties to show the world that we have great terroir to grow Cabernet or Chardonnay, or are you going to plant indigenous grapes and work on elevating our clones and varieties and continue that culture of farming indigenous grapes? Most international winemakers that come to Armenia choose to work with native grapes. Although there are projects that have planted European varieties as well. I would say it's a philosophical question. In general, our grape varieties tend to lend themselves very well to our climate and soil and growing conditions. Me personally it's more interesting to work with our indigenous grape varieties and start working on discovering the clones and perhaps propagating them a little bit more further in a way that changes them slightly to produce a higher quality wine.
So you started, let's talk about you personally. You started your winemaking career with your father, Vaha's Armenian sparkling wine brand, Caucusus. But since 2017, you've made your own wines under the Zulal label, and you do focus on indigenous varieties. Now you've said, and I quote, making wine in Armenia is unlike anywhere else. We are on a journey to rediscover our indigenous grape varieties and realise the true potential of our terroir. So can you just elaborate a bit more about the indigenous varieties and your own experience of them so far?
Let's take a quick break.
Hey, Jordan Harbinger here of The Jordan Harbinger Show. Subscribe to the only show that will show you how to apply the world's greatest ideas from the most striking minds. We've got spies and CEOs, athletes and authors from Kobe Bryant to Malcolm Gladwell, Tony Hawk and Howie Mandel, and the chairman of Google, founders of LinkedIn and Instagram, antiquities smugglers, con men, brilliant scientists, national heroes, and even the head of the CIA. Come join and have a listen for yourself. Subscribe right now to The Jordan Harbinger Show, available on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and wherever you're listening now.
Yeah, so I grew up in Italy. My family had a winery in Tuscany and a winery in Puglia. This was the early 90s. And then I went to high school in the US, college in the US. And then I moved to Armenia. I've been living in Armenia for 5-6 years. My father invited me to participate in my first harvest for Kush in 2015, that fall in 2015. And I never thought I would work in wine. And then when he invited me, I thought it would be really fun. And I moved to Armenia immediately that winter. And so I started managing our Kush brand, which is our traditional method sparkling wine company. And then I slowly started working at Wineworks, which is my father's custom crush winery incubator. And I think I was building other people's brands and really looking at the industry as a whole. And so I decided that I wanted to have my own brand and my own project. I was 23 at the time. And I was really excited about exploring our indigenous grape varieties. We have quite a few indigenous grape varieties that no one has made single varietal before, and no one has microvinified to really understand the expression of these grapes. And so that really got me excited in terms of doing more experimentation and research. And so I do work with grape geneticists in the vineyards, and we go and hand pick and select grapes in the vines. I've experimented with grapes like Chilar, Tozot, Nazeli, Garmirgot, all these really beautiful grape varieties that maybe we can only find a couple tons of, enough to make 600 bottles or 1,000 bottles. And it's the first time that people have selected these grapes and made them single varietal. And I think that's one of the most exciting things that we have a very diverse array of varieties and indigenous grapes, and we're really just uncovering what we have. And in a lot of cases, they're very rare. In a lot of cases, they're almost lost. And so the mission with Zulal is to revitalize some of these grape varieties and really understand what we have in terms of grapes.
Now, I know that the areni is the best known red grape variety in Armenia. How would you describe the characteristics? Because it's a grape variety we're most likely perhaps to see in the UK that people might get the chance to try. How would you describe it to us?
Areni is a beautiful grape. It's thick-skinned, tight-clustered, is very versatile in the sense that it can make rosé wine and red wine and sparkling wine as well. I would say you get a lot of red fruit, you get a lot of cherries, and then you get that ground pepper and pepper notes and spicy notes as well. It tends to be medium bodied, but it has some structure and a little bit of a nice unexpected tannic structure. It does well in oak, and yeah, it's a really beautiful grape variety. So as a grape, it's currently the name of the grape variety, the name of a village, the name of what locals call the region, and it's also what the archaeological cave is named after, and the oldest shoe that was discovered in the world, which is called the Areni 1 shoe.
I would love to see that. That's amazing. I think you also didn't you help create a Riedel glass for that would suit Areni. What tell us about that?
Yes, that was a really, I would say the creation of the Areni glass with Riedel was one of the watershed moments in Armenian wine industry. It really proved that we have really great wines that we're making, and they have different characteristics and expressions from other grapes. There was a group of 7 Armenian winemakers that went to Kustein and tasted with Georg Riedel. There was a lineup of around 8 different glasses, and the one that was selected is it's a tulip shaped. And after that tasting, now a lot of the cases for the Pinot Noir glasses, because it is somewhat similar in shape to a Pinot Noir glass, have Areni written on the box, which is a lovely recognition of a really noble grape variety that we have.
So just changing the subject slightly, I wonder how you view the geopolitics of your region and how they affect the winemaking. It's certainly, I don't think it can be easy running a winery in a conflict zone, which you've had to do, obviously.
Geopolitics are tricky to navigate. There's a couple things that affect the wine industry. One is, of course, transportation is a little bit difficult to get the wines exported outside of the country. You have added costs because we have 2 closed borders. In terms of safety in the vineyard, sometimes we do have issues up north in Tavush. We've had some issues recently over the last couple of years, specifically with Kush. Kush, we harvest grapes from a village called Khachik village, and this village sits 1,700 meters in elevation, so that puts them at the highest elevation vineyards in the Northern Hemisphere. And these vineyards just happen to be situated between the Armenian military base and the Azeri military base. So you can imagine that sometimes it's a little bit tricky. We do have to get special clearance sometimes to work with our farmers, but we've been working in these vineyards since the inception of Kush, and they're just a beautiful piece of vineyards that just happen to be sit in somewhat of a precarious situation. The vines are 100 and 120 years old, so they predate the Soviet Union and date some of the borders that were drawn during the dissolution. Especially we had a war that broke up in 2020, and that was a little difficult. We had farmers that had to harvest at night, one by one, so it took a little bit longer than expected. Although we are situated higher up than the Azeri military base, so it is a disadvantage for them to have any action on that side of the border. It still is it is an area that we have to maintain safety measures and just be very cognizant of.
And in terms of the border with Azerbaijan, I read somewhere that Armenia had lost quite a lot of the land, some of the wineries, some of the forests to Azerbaijan. How has that affected things, and how can you protect that in the future?
Yes, so that region you're referring to is called Artsakh or Nagorno-Karabakh. It's a beautiful wine growing region, and it's known for a grape called Sireni or Khandokhni. It's clay soil and these kind of rolling mountains, and it's actually also very rich in vitis vinifera varieties. We've recently uncovered around 100 different indigenous grapes in that small piece of land, and it was growing quite a bit as a region until the war broke out in 2020, and we lost 3 wineries. We lost around 60% of our oak forest that we used to make Caucasian oak, and we lost two of our coopers. So it is that region specifically has a lot of difficulties and challenges that it faces in terms of making wine. But one thing I would say is that all of us winemakers that work in that region are committed to maintaining that land under Armenia. So we see it as some sort of a commitment that we continue to replant and regrow and maintain that land for vineyards and winemaking, because like most places that are on conflict zone, we'll stay, and we will use that as a way to protect our borders.
Now you, Amy, are very much part of the younger generation. I think you're not even 30 yet, is that right?
That's correct. I'm 28, turning 29 in July.
But as we've discussed before, you do many things. You know, you make your own wine. You work as a brand ambassador for Riedel. You're in charge of wine works. You're even launching your own wine magazine, as far as I'm aware. Given all these different perspectives on the industry, how do you see the future for Armenian wine?
I think Armenian wine has a very bright future. We're sitting at a point right now where our quality has changed drastically over the last 10 years, and our culture has become a wine drinking culture in Armenia. Right now we have an interesting situation where the demand of our wines are growing, but the supply of our grapes is somewhat not matched. So we're going to see a lot of large scale vineyard planting in the future. We're going to see an increase of quality of the wine. We're going to see more growth within our exports, and I think we're going to see a lot of different smaller projects and grower projects really digging into our indigenous grape varieties, and we're going to start defining a little bit more what our wine industry looks at, where we don't have appellations yet, we don't have vineyard designations. It's really just we have these vineyards and land and farmers that work on it, and so that gives us a lot of room to innovate right now and experiment, which is very exciting. So it's a little open-ended, but it's going to look very bright.
Well, we're very much hoping we see more Armenian wines in the UK. But Amy, thank you so much for your time. It's been fantastic talking to you.
Thank you. It was a pleasure.
So Armenians as ancient winemaker merchants floating down the Euphrates. I love that. Exactly. But, you know, I think it will be really interesting to see how Armenia evolves and reinvents itself, as it were.
Yeah.
You know, the idea of an ancient but also very young wine scene.
Which is really exciting, isn't it?
There's so many possibilities that entails, isn't it? You know, it's quite similar to Georgia in a way.
Yeah.
And really exciting.
Yeah. I'd love to try more of those grape varieties. You know, Chila, Tozot, Nazeli, Karmelkot, Sireni. I mean, it's amazing that there are thought to be 500 to 1,000 indigenous Armenian grape varieties.
I know, that's a book in itself, isn't it?
It is.
And as we said earlier, with all that mountainous land at altitude, this fierce weather, you know, you get the sense that the possibilities are endless.
Yeah, imagine how good those wines
if
could
only
be.
They can have some stability and time to develop and you know. Anyway, one point I also picked up on that note was what she said about this disputed Nagorno-Karabakh territory. How she wants to protect Armenia's territory and borders through winemaking.
Yeah. I mean, sort of fighting talk, isn't it? It's just so, I think it's just so sad when something as beautiful and ancient as wine, which should bring people together, becomes itself a victim of violence and conflict. You know, it's just, really, really sad. Anyway, we wish the people in the area well and hope a constructive resolution can be found. Although Amy did say, when I talked to her off tape, as it were, that conflict has resumed, unfortunately, since the eyes of the world were distracted by the war in Ukraine.
Let's take a quick break.
Do you want to change the world? Former Tesla executive turned podcaster Billy Samoa is on a mission to help you do it. His show, Inside Out, reveals transformational insights that can literally change your life. If you're a change maker who wants to make an impact while you're on this planet, then this is the podcast for you. Through deep dive interviews with the world's most remarkable people, your mind will be filled with new ideas and perspectives that will give you the secrets you need to make your mark. Go to insightoutshow.com or subscribe to Insight Out on your favorite podcast platform.
Yeah, it must be a really tricky time for them because, you know, Russia is one of Armenia's main export markets, isn't it?
Yeah, along with the US. So, a difficult situation. Yeah. I mean, you know, they're a small country. They need to make a living. They're dependent on Russia to a certain extent. But equally, they can't really be seen to be supporting Russia or supplying Russia or capitalising on this horrific war. I mean, it just cannot be easy making those decisions.
No. I mean,
I wouldn't want to be in that position.
It's not easy. You know, yeah, absolutely. Well said. But we've got a few of Amy's wines here to taste.
Yeah, on a brighter note, yeah. So we were intrigued by the notion of Armenian sparkling wine, weren't we?
Armenian fizz, there we go.
Woo. Who knew?
I know.
And we really like the Kush Ultra Brut Nature Blanc de Noir 2017. Now, this is made from Areni Noir in the Vayots-Dzor region, grown at 1,750 metres above sea level, hand-picked, as they say, from ungrafted century-old vines in the Hashik village. And it was really nice, wasn't it? Bready, fleshy, biscuity, you know, quite generous, stylish. I mean, really classy, spot on. Proof of Areni's versatility.
I know, it's amazing it's made from Areni, isn't it? It's fantastic. I mean, I know Areni can be compared to Pinot Noir, but, you know, to make a really lovely, classic, beautiful sparkling wine,
we were
that
impressed,
was
weren't we?
really, really impressive, and something that wasn't on our radar at all. So,
No.
I mean, my only criticism of that wine was, yes, it was classic and stuff, but probably just a little bit dry for me.
Well, I mean, the Brut Nature thing, I think we both agreed that it would have, you know.
Yeah. I mean, we talked about this on our last program about dosage, don't we? We think that this trend for zero dosage is going too far, and actually wines would be more complete, complex, and just generally well balanced if they had more dosage.
Just a small amount.
This was just a small amount, and this was one of the cases. And it's a small criticism because overall it's a really lovely wine, but it just could have had a touch more residual sugar and be more complex and rewarding. But apart from that, you know, absolutely,
we were really impressed. They look good as well. Just to say, you know, they're really smart looking bottles.
Areni sparkling should be on everyone's radar. There we go.
Okay, so moving on, we've got the Zulal Voskahat Reserve 2018, also from Vayots. Now, Voskahat is very productive, used for brandy, but this was grown at altitude and barrel fermented, and it's rich and rounded, oaky, a little bit spicy, lovely silky texture, not particularly high acid, but you know, kind of that sort of classy, bold, foodie, and yet 13% alcohol, so not too.
Yeah, it's quite oaky, isn't it? But it has behind that, what's really nice, it has a lovely sort of orange rind lift and a sort of honeysuckle perfume.
Yeah.
And it almost, I thought, maybe a touch of botrytis. A little noble rot from a long hang time. I might be wrong, to be honest, but it was quite complex in not just an oaky way. But the important thing was it was a bit different.
Absolutely, and that's what we're looking for, isn't it?
It's exactly. But actually, the one I really love was the Zulal Karmir Kot, which I've got just here, and I love this bottle. This is the 2018. It was also from Vayots-Dzor.
The Reserve 2018,
and apparently this was the first ever release of this Armenian grape. It's got a very dramatic label, hasn't it? With this
it's beautiful.
Horse.
It's actually beautiful. Yes.
Whatever. We'll put a photo on the website. But it's a lovely style. You know, I mean, they describe it as having galloping acidity and a bit of oak tannin, which is quite a dramatic way of describing it. You know, I'd definitely say it's quite rugged. It's a rugged beauty, if you like. Rich fruit, you know, sort of high-toned VA, but what it's lovely, it's kind of got this wild sort of exotic, kind of slightly mad nose or aroma, but then it's got this lovely firm grounding tannin, very serious sort of palate. It's almost, for me, it reminded me of a Nebbiolo or a Grenache cross, almost, you know, and I found it to be intriguing and again a bit different.
I think you liked it more than me, didn't you? I mean, I struggled with the alcohol's 15%, and you know, that isn't always a bad thing, but it just was the style was overall a bit much for me. But definitely, as you say, characterful, and that's what we are looking for.
Yeah, you do get that. You do get that. As well as the alcohol, you do that grounding tannin, which can be the sort of thing in Barolo, can't it? Where you get the big alcohol, but you got the grounding.
Yes, exactly, and it works. Yeah. For me, just a bit big. Anyway, I also, excuse me,
it's all that Karmir Kot. It's doing your voice. And
I can't.
Podcasters beware.
I also chatted with Juliana Delaila Ernekian. She runs Karas Wines, which is based in Armenia, not far from the capital Yerevan. She's in business with her great uncle, Eduardo Ernekian, who is based in Argentina and is one of that country's richest men.
Yeah, I think it's sort of media and travel, isn't it?
Anyway, and they also own, and she also runs Bodega del Fin del Mundo in Patagonia, Argentina.
Now, Karas is quite a new project, isn't it?
Yeah. Like many others in this new era or renaissance of Armenian wine, you know, it's fairly new. I think it was founded in 2004 and the first vintage was 2010. It's named after the Karas, which is what the big clay winemaking vessels are called in Armenia, like the Georgian Qvevri. They make wine at Karas from both international and indigenous grape varieties. But I asked Juliana specifically about the indigenous varieties.
Well, in particular for Karas, as we started at a time that we didn't have much information about wine in Armenia, no, and we didn't know at that time the indigenous varieties that we know today, no. our story started only less than 20 years ago, so it's very short. And in especially the last 10 years, we discovered so many new things, so many new varieties, so many ways of working with these varieties. And we got to know more intimately how to deal with areni, for example, that it's the most important grape that we have in Armenia. So it took us a lot of time, not so much in terms of wine time, but quite a lot in terms of our short history to get to know how to make the best wine with these grapes that we didn't know so far. And when we talk about, for example, areni, which now I'm in love with, and I think it's amazing, and it has a lot of different phases to discover, we get a sort of wine that is like between like a Nebbiolo and a Pinot Noir, if we try to compare it with something that we already know. And it's very interesting because the flavors and the textures that we can find in a areni is not something that we have tasted before, no? So I think that's something that it's very like exciting to see that we still have so many new things and new flavors and things to discover in a moment when we thought, I think, that in the wine world everything was already known, no? So, and this is just like the tip of the iceberg, because with areni, I think we've experienced a little bit more than with the rest of the varieties that we are still getting to know. We have more than 130 indigenous varieties in Armenia. In Caraz, we are only working with 5. So we still have so much to do. We have an experimental vineyard in the winery, and we are trying to bring new varieties into our vineyard in order to really investigate deeply what we can do with these varieties, which are really, really amazing.
You talk about areni as that sort of almost like a combination between Nebbiolo and Pinot Noir. I mean, we have, even in a short space of time, Peter and I have tasted wines that go from sparkling wines to full-bodied reds, all made from areni. So it obviously does have that capability to do many different things.
In terms of tasting, it reminds me of these two, but also when we make wine out of these grapes, it reminds me particularly of Pinot Noir, which is the one that I know the best, as we make Pinot Noir in Patagonia. I see that just as Pinot Noir, areni needs a mature vine to make better wine, no? So I see that when the years go by, the wine is, and the grapes are even better than the previous one, no? So, and I see that same like a phenomenon with Pinot Noir, and it's not just like, it doesn't happen with every grape, no, with every vine. Like, for example, with Malbec, you can make great wine with a very young vine of Malbec, no? But it doesn't happen with Pinot Noir, and it doesn't happen with areni. So it's great that we could find in Armenia some really ancient plants of areni, which are very interesting to see the wine that comes from those vines. In our winery, we planted all a new vineyard, no? So we are still discovering what type of wines and what kind of things we can do with that. But I see now that the vines are much more mature, that the wine is even more balanced, and that it's more expressive, you know? And I think we are just now discovering what we can do with it.
Now, one thing I wanted to ask you about, talking of sort of innovation, experiments, you've got some experimental wines as well, haven't you? You've got an orange wine made from Cangun, which I had never heard of before. So that's one of the indigenous varieties. And then I think a couple of micro terroir Syrahs as well. How did those come about, and what's different about them?
Let's take a quick break. Yo, everybody. My name is Warren, and I have a question for you. Do you like The Simpsons? Do you think it's arguably the greatest show of all time? Well, if you said yes, then you really need to check out my podcast called Simpsons is Greater Than. Some weeks I talk to people who work on the show, I talk to other big fans of the show, and I even deep dive on some of your favorite episodes. Still not sure? Well, you don't have to take my word for it. Here is what Nancy Cartwright, the voice of Bart Simpson, thinks.
You are a breath of fresh air. I loved it, and thanks so much for having Warren.
Simpsons is Greater Than is a place where we celebrate the show from top to bottom, and I hope you all check it out.
Well, Cancun is very interesting too. It's a grape it's a white grape that is used also for distillation to make the Armenian cognac, the Armenian brandy. And we make wine also from it. And when we have this wine called Caucusus in Armenian, the translation would be like piece of fire. It's like a spark, no, like something that explodes, but it doesn't repeat one. Like it's unique, no, because a spark, for example, it's one spark is not the same as the other, no. And the idea behind this wine, and it's actually it's like Cara's alter ego, no? So it's like in Caucusus we play and we try to find new faces of our terroir and outside of what we do for our more like the wines that we have in our portfolio. And this orange wine was an experiment at first, like trying to see what are other things we could do with Cancun. With Cancun also we make still white wine, we put it in blends. We also try to make sparkling wine from it. So we were just trying to see what we could do. And we came by this orange wine that is, I love it. We ferment it in Caras, in amphora.
Yeah.
And then we just for the fermentation, and then we just put it in stainless steel tanks with skins for 9 months. And we just keep it there. And the wine it's very interesting because it's an orange wine in its flavors, but in its color, it's quite like a white wine. No, it's not very orange. And it's very delicate, but also very, very interesting. And it's a wine that you can drink by its own, or you can also pair it with food, and it's really, really nice.
Now, I know that you work with Michel Roland, who's an international consultant, and there are various international consultants working across Armenia, people like Alberto Antonini. Is there a risk that the wines might lose their sense of identity, their uniqueness, their heritage, if the winemaking becomes more international, for want of a better term?
That's a great question. And I think about that myself, no? But I think that when it comes to Michel, for example, and the way of working that we have, I think that for me, he's sort of a mentor. I learned everything that I know about wine from him. I've been working with him since I started in this amazing world. In a way, like he helped me discover what I wanted, or what I wanted to show, or how to show, or how to make the best wine from this place possible, no? So it's not that he is like making the wine in a way that he likes, but he's like helping me discover, and helping us, no, as a team, the ones that we work in Caras, discover with another point of view, no, what we can do, or what's the best way of, for example, making areni. No, with his advice, we planted areni in different places of our vineyard to understand which was the best type of soil for this grape. No, we tried different ways of pruning. We tried different ways of winemaking after in the winery. So he's like an advisor. No, he's not the person like making all the final decisions, but he's helping us understand, or helping us maybe answer some questions when we are working. No? In Armenia now, there's a winemaker that lives there all year round. His name is Gabriel Rogel. He's really talented. He's also Argentinian. He has been living there for 9 years, so he's almost Armenian now. But there's a wonderful team of people and together we learned how to work in Armenia, no? Because this was a place that had a lot of interesting things, and a very ancient history, but we didn't really know what to do, no? So it was a lot of like trial and error, and the advice of Michel, for me, it was fundamental. But it's not that we are making wines for his palate, for example, no? We are making wines to understand and to show Armenia how it is, and in its most pure way, no? Or more honest way.
I just wonder, as a final question, how you see the future of Armenian wine.
Well, I think I'm very excited for the future, and I think that I'm very privileged to be a part of this this transformation, of this rebirth of the Armenian viticulture, and I see the huge changes that we made since we started. No, when I started working in Caras like 7 years ago, I was like, well, I have a winery in Armenia and another one in Patagonia, and everyone was like, well, tell me more about Patagonia. Now it's the other way around. Like, people are really excited, and I think that's part of the work that we've done to put Armenia on the map, no? And people are getting excited and very curious to understand what's going on, what's happening in Armenia, what's about this ancient place that now is making wines that are modern, or that have like an orange wine, or what's going on. And I think that it's important that as winemakers we get involved in this process, and we really try to work for a better future. No, so it's not a matter only of making great wines and putting those wines in the world, but also about being responsible. For example, with the bottles, with sustainability, with turning organic if that's a possibility, but trying to make a better world with these wines, no? Like, for example, for me, I making wines in Armenia is not only about making wine, but it's also about my history, my family, like getting people to know Armenia. And why am I an Armenian that lives in Argentina? Well, that's because my great-grandparents had to flee from Armenia because of genocide. So there's a lot of things to tell about Armenia and about what's going on there through wine. And I think that that's part of the future also, no? To try to keep on building Armenia with this great opportunity that we have, that is wine that people are curious about. So I think that's an opportunity.
Juliana, it's been so lovely to talk to you. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for having me.
We are indeed a curious bunch, us wine lovers, aren't we?
We are. Of course we are.
On which note, areni as like a cross between Nebbiolo and Pinot Noir. I think that combination is guaranteed to wear every wine lover's whistle, isn't it?
You're not kidding.
You know.
And that's like the dream combo, isn't it?
Interesting, I'm just thinking actually, Alberto Antonini apparently sort of likens areni to a cross between Sangiovese and Pinot Noir. So not a million miles away.
No.
But you get that sense of the tannin that's in there as well from areni. Quite rugged.
Yeah, and we did like some of Juliana's arenis. The Caucusus Areni 2019 from Ararat had a lovely freshness about it, didn't it? And as well as sort of some exotic spices and a bit floral, and it's got juicy acidity. It's not overdone, nicely medium bodied, as you say, shades of Sangiovese, or maybe Touriga even, and just good for food. Really.
I mean, not trying to be too big. That was a lovely thing about that wine. You could see it. There was sort of slightly hands off, not trying to be too ambitious. Just make a sort of medium-bodied, easygoing wine, and actually it worked really well. That's often the sign of a good grape variety, isn't it?
It is. But and then also, actually, though, we did like their Caucusus Single Vineyard Areni 2020 again, Ararat, which was a bit bigger. It was a bit richer, aged in American oak, but with a nice leathery, chalky sort of complexity that we really liked. It was characterful.
There were elements of sort of Malbec or Mencia or Xinomavro in there. I think we're pretty much throwing every variety we can think of at Areni as what it's like.
Well, maybe that shows how
it shows its versatility.
Versatile it is.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Which is intriguing in itself. If you guys try some, send us in. Your opinions too.
Yeah. What do you think?
Now it's also true to say we liked their white blend, didn't we? The 2020, which is a blend of Kangun. Is that right? Kangun. Chardonnay and Viognier from Ararat, which is sort of peachy and waxy. Really sort of succulent and generous. It's quite a modern style. It's quite fleshy, almost a sort of, I don't know, Mediterranean vibe, I'd say.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
And you like their orange wine as well, didn't you? Which we've got here, which is a cool bottle.
Oh, and I love the bottle. That bottle, I mean, I know this sounds crazy, but it is really, it's got this fabulous sort of orange wax seal at the top, and then this picture of a blue Caucusus with the sunshine and flames, and it's amazing. Anyway, so this is the Krati Ktor 2020, made from Kangun, the grape variety Kangun in Ararat. So it has 10 months skin contact. It's not particularly orange in colour, and actually in your mouth, it's quite subtle as well.
It is actually.
But it is yeasty. There's some orange rind, some apricot. They could have probably been a bit braver with this and gone for a bit more skin contact, but it's very engaging. You know, it's lifted, it's floral, delicate. I thought there were notes of orange flower water there. You know, I mean, generally speaking, you know, you look at these wines and think there's so much potential for experimentation in Armenia, huge potential. There are these distinctive, well-made wines. There are more wines that could be made, obviously, in a range of styles. You know, we're looking at fizz to sweet already. You know, there's everything that can be made here, and there's ambition too. Yeah. I mean, you know, and a growing range of producers. We've like Zora's wines in the past as well. They're arenis, haven't we?
Yeah. I think what's important to say it would be really nice to see an emphasis on indigenous varieties,
given there are so many and such good ones.
Exactly. You know, we've tried some others, haven't we? You know, Syrah, Cabernet Franc, Malbec, but you sort of feel, okay, you know, that might work to get your foot in the door internationally because people recognise those and they don't recognise Armenia, but if you've got all those indigenous varieties, back yourself with those. You know, it's a huge point of difference. Yes, it might take a bit more for people to get to know them, but once you've got people to know them, that's your market. And that's what you do. That's what you've done historically. That's what wine's all about.
Absolutely. And focus on elegance and drinkability. Absolutely.
That's another really, really good point.
Yeah. So you've got these indigenous varieties, make them in a beautifully elegant, drinkable way with character.
Don't overdo them. Because you lose the identity if you overdo them.
I mean, there's no point in kind of covering them in oak and extracting huge extraction in the red so that they're super tannic or over ripening or whatever. They need the opposite. These young winemakers need to let the grapes and the terroirs shine.
Yeah. So on that note, you know, we did try the Grand Carasse 2017, which is described as a Syrah-led blend aged in American and French oak. It's 15% alcohol. You know, and I'm sorry, but it just tastes like Rioja, you know, or any number of, you know, similar wines from around the world trying to be big and ripe and oaky. And I think that for me is a crying shame. It's almost like I taste the wine and I think, it almost makes me cry because I don't want to overdo this, but it's just a shame, you know. And I don't want to blame Michel Rolland
because it's not a bad wine, is it? It's not an international wine.
It's a missed opportunity. If that's the one wine people buy and they come away thinking it just tastes like Rioja, you think why buy more? Yeah, you know. So like I say, I don't want to blame Michel Rolland, who is the consultant who works on that project, as Juliana was talking about. I don't want to blame the Argentine connection. You know, Carasse are actually making some interesting single vineyard Syrahs, aren't they? Even though they could be better again. But, you know, why make a wine from Armenia that could come from anywhere in the world?
Yeah. But maybe this is what will naturally happen as the sector evolves and it gains confidence. You know, one to watch, I would say, and hopefully it'll go down the route of the indigenous varieties.
I really hope so.
Making them
Juliana
really
was
well.
That, wasn't she? That's what they'd like to do. So I'd really, really hope that's what producers focus on.
Use modern knowledge and technology to actually make some really interesting wines along with the traditional techniques as well. Use
that knowledge, but make the indigenous varieties wines that are distinctive. And I tell you what else, you know, they definitely shouldn't fall into the trap of the heavy bottle, overly traditional packaging. That again would be another own goal. You know, you're basically inventing a new category in front of people's eyes. Do something fun and new and engaging and make it sustainable and forward thinking. Make it not something that harks back to the past. You know, the wines do that themselves. The history does that. The grape varieties do that. Make the packaging innovative and sustainable, and eco-friendly and just fun.
Quite.
Is that...
Quite.
Is that my rant?
So, I think that's a good note to end on. All things new and exciting. What a pleasure it's been getting to know Armenia and its wines a bit more. All details, including the wines, are on the show notes. Thanks to Amy and Juliana, and thanks to you for listening. Until next time, cheers.